Welcome to Latter Daily Digest. We honor creators, and today we have Donna Banta on the show. She's an author, and she's written books, some of them are Mormon themed. Welcome to the show, Donna.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
So I want to start off with Jean, how did you find Donna and her material?
So probably because we have a lot of ex-Mormon friends in common, or we'll say just friends in common on Facebook. And then I look at people's profiles, and if it says that they wrote a book, or if it says they have a podcast or anything creative, I automatically try to say hi and get more information and ask them to be on my show.
Perfect. All right. So shall we start with your background, Donna, and how you came to be in this space?
So I grew up in Glendale, California, it's right next to Los Angeles, LA area. And I was a convert to Mormonism. I had tons of Mormon friends in school, and they were a great group. And so it was just a wonderful, wonderful place to go. There were so many great activities. We had road shows, we had dances, there was this wonderful youth conference out on Catalina Island. It was called Super Challenge. It was just awesome. And I could go to a dance and not feel like a big klutz that I am. And, because everybody's so accepting, you step on someone, it's okay. I have 2 feet, Donna, I have another foot. It was just sort of just a really wonderful and a nurturing place. And so I joined the church there, and then I ended up going to BYU.
About how old were you when you joined?
14. I was Joseph Smith's age. Yeah.
And did anybody have any pushback in your family or relatives? Did you notice anything like that?
That's funny. No, I mean, at that time, this was the early 70s, kids, it was sort of a thing to join a cult, I mean, I hate to say it, but at least this one was, and I was raised by my mom, but mostly my grandparents, we lived all three, I lived with all of them. I think they felt like, well, okay, so she wants to join this group where they don't drink and they don't smoke and there's no sex until you're married. And, during the early 70s, seeing the youth culture, I think they were like,
that's right. Sex,
whatever.
drugs, and rock and roll.
Yeah.
I've heard that a lot. I think, yeah.
So
like, well, at least they're not, out partying. So what harm could there possibly be?
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I think they felt that. Well, I think that I remember my grandfather saying, well, I thought this was something you were just going to do as a young person, I didn't think you were going to continue this as an adult. Yeah, and so I don't think they understood at the time. It was just a good activity. But
yeah.
So I went to BYU after that, of course, and that's when I started to realize that this wasn't the right place for me. I think I must have been very sheltered in LA. That sounds kind of strange, but it was, in the sense that as Mormons, I wonder if it's the same way for Mormon kids that grow up in Las Vegas. I don't know, but there were a lot of people in the Warden Stake who were in the movie industry, in the music industry. For example, we had the actor Gordon Jump, wonderful character actor, was in our stake. He lived a few blocks from us. Very nice man. And,
he was Peter in the
Temple movie. He played the kind of ditzy station manager on WKRP in Cincinnati. But he was also in some really good films too, right. And that were, maybe some.
He was the original Maytag man, I think, as well.
Oh yes, he was yeah, that's right. He was the Maytag repairman. Yeah, and there were people that worked in, behind the scenes in Hollywood, and so I didn't know it's not like we weren't told to be careful what we watch, be careful what we listen to. We were in LA, but not with the same rigidity.
Yeah.
At BYU,
a kid almost anywhere outside of Utah, I feel like, but especially on the coast, like super East Coast, I've heard that about the upper New York, DC, that kind of area in general. There's just a lot of diversity there. And I think the same, for the West Coast. So both coasts have very different personalities, I think, to say, but they still have a very nuanced.
But it's like, be careful.
Yeah.
But it's not something to avoid, but just be careful, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was not a sin. When I got to BYU, it was a sin to go to an R-rated movie. I remember hearing, because I was an English major, and I'm a creative type person, that I guess they call us creatives now, right? I'm a creative. And I would hear all the time, there's a mischievousness to the arts, and it was really, I could just tell I wasn't going to fit into this culture, and I was a convert, so I never really felt like there was one and only true church, even though I probably got up and said that in testimony meeting, like, we all did. But so I was ready to leave to finish my education. I found some nice friends there, because it's a big place, and you can find people that are sort of like-minded,
other creatives.
Other creatives. Yeah. But I was gonna leave, and then my senior year I met my husband, and he was born and raised in the church, and he's not a creative. Well, he is sort of a creative, but he's also an accountant. But I think he and I were pretty like-minded, but he had been raised in the church, so it was different for him. He was wedded to it. He was a returned missionary, and so we stayed in for. I recommitted and stayed in for a while, and that,
Right. And did you graduate before you got married, or right around the same time, or?
My maiden name is on my diploma. That is it. It's a point of pride, but we did get married just like, about 6 months after I graduated. So, yeah. Or let's see. Yeah, about 6 months.
That's right. Graduate in April and marry in December?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So a little more than 6 months. Yeah. But where I was actually a college graduate and, single.
And so you were kind of a feminist for being, because you weren't raised with patriarchy as a system. And
my family was pretty conservative, but compared to the Mormon patriarch, no. I mean, I was raised by my grandparents, and they had a very conventional marriage, but my grandmother was a strong person. She definitely had her say in the household, and
she was more like Rosie the Riveter than passive housewife.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I think Mormonism is like really, I mean, in the doctrine has this submission tag. So I think if you're not raised in that specifically, I can see how you can be conservative and still be like, traditional marriage, man and a woman, and but not quite have as strongly like the man is the man and he makes the decisions kind of a dynamic.
Right, because it's authority from God that the man takes rule over the household in a way.
Yeah. No, it was, so I wasn't raised with the patriarchy, and I was pretty shocked. I don't know if either of you went to BYU, but I was very shocked to see that there were so many girls there that were just there to get married, and the rigid politics. I was always liberal politically, and you could be Republican or you could be evil. It was and then there was also just the crazy stuff, like the late night discussions about, the three Nephites, or, what color my sky. Yeah, what color my sky would be when I have my own planet. Where you're like, oh God, I'm not in Kansas anymore. Yeah, it was it was pretty strange that people really took some of this stuff so literally. So
there were some sort of Mormon myths, like the temple in Salt Lake, the angel, the statue of Moroni was going to trumpet the return of Jesus, and other things like that. Like you say, the three Nephites that would come and help people, stories.
Yeah, the three big guys standing behind her. Yeah.
Yeah.
and the mugger runs off because of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or to
Certain
change
things
your
like that.
tire on the
Oh
road.
yeah, they're always changing a tire. Yeah. There's
But
always
they're never, busting in, stopping, child abuse when it's happening. Unfortunately, it seems they're
I
mechanics.
know. I know they don't bust into the bishop's office when he's interviewing a 13-year-old. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so did you have your introduction to Mormonism, did it include any of the sort of weird or outdated things that were discussed, like why didn't blacks get the priesthood until 1978? Or what about polygamy? How did
Oh
people
yeah.
respond to your questions?
I just put those in a drawer, I mean, and like so many people, I asked about it, and it started bothering me, of course, later, but I unfortunately just, I remember not even really thinking about polygamy. And until one year, I guess it was in my junior year, there was a woman that became engaged to this. Oh, he was this very, very handsome young man. His last name was Allred. And she had gone to visit his family over Christmas and had come home, like escaped, gone to a payphone and called home and said, "Help me," and because it was apparently there was this expectation that she was going to be a plural wife. So
That's right.
that was something that was I believe his last name. I believe he was an Allred, but I probably shouldn't say that for sure. But it was a familiar name now. But yeah. And I think he was asked to leave campus. I don't know if he was excommunicated, but he was asked to leave that
Because he was
campus.
recruiting.
I guess, yeah. I don't know too many details, but I just accept that the effect that it had on me, that this is actually something that is going on still, and that people of course they take it literally if they believe in, and it's still in the Doctrine and Covenants. So yeah.
Right. So you get married and you start doing the Mormon thing, right? It's all about raising a family now.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And you're so busy. You don't have time to think about.
I want to jump in and ask here, when you got married, I mean, how did you view your role? Were you trying to be the Mormon wife, or were you trying to be the best, your version of a Mormon wife? You know what I mean? Were you giving up your identity or sticking with it pretty well? Or I mean, usually kind of in the middle, but
Yeah, I
would
think
you describe what your expectations were and how they aligned with your husband's. And
I had a really hard time. We had a baby right away, our son, who's a great guy. But that was really rough, just going from being this person who likes to read and write and go to films and discuss plays, and then to be just home with a baby.
Right.
And
you had been an independent woman.
yeah, well,
college girl.
As at BYU, yeah. As independent a woman you can be at BYU.
Did you want to have a baby
Oh,
when
yeah.
you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought I did. I just didn't understand what I was signing on for. And part of it was there wasn't the kind of intellectual stimulation that I'd had in college that, I might have had I not been LDS, but it was we were in a married student ward. There were other Mormon wives there. Some of them were, but a lot of them were just about being at home and doing crafts. And it just seems so foreign to me to be learning how to, I don't know, can fruit or something. I didn't understand. I live in an apartment. I don't have room for a food storage. I don't, and it just none of it really made sense. The transition from going from college to this sort of, frontier woman kind of, I don't know. I think it was around that time there was a Mrs. Utah. There was some kind of an interview with a Mrs. Utah that that she felt like she didn't deserve the title because she didn't hand sew her children's underwear. And I just remember, and that she used Bisquick.
Oh,
and
right.
Yeah,
how dare she?
I don't know what to do with it.
I bet she used boxed cake mixes too.
I
Little cheater.
Yeah, yeah, and yet, she probably had a really good plastic surgeon though. I don't know. Anyway, whatever.
Yeah. And
So
so,
that's
what,
fine.
what was your temple experience like? What'd you think of that?
Oh, it was so strange. Okay, so the first time I went to the temple, it was in the Provo Temple. It was my first time through, right? And I went through with our bishop and his wife. And of course, the bishop was sitting over on Mark's side, and he was, and the wife on mine, and she just slept through the whole thing. She didn't help me at all. I mean, she tried to, it's not that she didn't want to. She was probably just exhausted from all that canning and sewing underwear and stuff. I don't know. And so she slept, whereas the bishop kept trying to help Mark with his clothing and all this. And he didn't need the help because he'd been through. And so then finally we get up to the veil, and there was this just absolute witch there, at the veil. And I was like, I was messing up big time because I'd never done it before. And every time I would make a mistake, she would like this, like, you idiot. And I'm like, my God, this stuff doesn't come natural to people.
It is like a long, almost like an entire verse kind of that you're.
Yes,
the
name
secret.
Yeah.
Never heard it before. You've heard it for the first time there.
Yeah.
And so I think that's unusual. I think most and you have a little label on that clearly identifies you as somebody being there for the first time.
Yeah, I told her.
Usually, and they just prompt you. And was she expecting you to like get it right from the beginning, like starting over?
I think so. I think, I even said, no, I said, I'm nervous. And I'm sorry, I'm nervous. And she said, why?
This is the greatest day of your life. You're receiving an endowment from God, a further light and knowledge. What could you possibly?
I think I went through 50 to 70 times and I never memorized it ever.
You did.
Even the last maybe 5 times I went on the internet and I saw New Name Noah's recording so that I could practice. I would look for like scripts.
Are you kidding? So as a believing Mormon, still you would go and watch it? That's
around 2010, it's like I want to learn this somehow, right? But it was just there's something about my brain that doesn't like to learn long scriptures or long passages.
Oh, so you probably sucked at scripture chase too then. Yeah.
Yeah. When we had to memorize the scripture in seminary, I memorized the rings and nose jewels, which is somebody talking about, people that are haughty or something. And somebody says, well, why didn't you memorize Jesus wept? That would have been easier.
There you go.
Like, what? I didn't read that part yet.
Yeah, no, I got really good at the temple. I was like one of those Chippendale dancers, I could take off the clothes back on you.
I've never heard it described that way, but I love it.
Yeah, quick change artist.
So you're at the Vel, you had this woman that was annoyed and frustrated with you.
Oh, she was just very self-righteous, very judgy, yeah.
And then what about after that? Is there anything more that stands out to you about that before we move on? Yeah.
Oh no, I mean, I just wanted to get married. That's the thing. I went through. This is another kind of side story. I remember when I had to have the temple recommend interview, and I was in the stake president's, or I think he was a counselor, not the president. And there at BYU in my ward, and I was having this interview, and he was asking me all these personal questions about Mark and I and what we were, if we were, how we kissed, and do we, I'm not going to go into it because it's embarrassing. But he was asking a lot of these personal things that we did. Okay, so you've not had, you've not had sex, but you did. Have you done this, this, and this, and I just started lying. It's like, I want to get married so bad. I have to go through all these hoops. I can't just get married. I have to, so
the church creates an environment to encourage lying.
Yeah. I just lied. And so then I thought Mark had to go in and I thought, oh no, he's going to ask all the same questions and he's not going to lie because he doesn't lie. And, it's embarrassing to think,
Wait, is that what happened?
no, well, so no, oh no, the guy didn't ask Mark any of those questions. Guess what? Yeah.
Now, Mark had been on a mission, right?
Yeah.
So maybe he just assumed that either A, Mark was a good return missionary, or B, he already knows the drill about not speaking up.
I think you're missing it. I think you're wrong. I think
Yeah,
Megan gets it, and I think Jean doesn't.
Right. No, this is a sad thing about it.
Yeah.
It just, and I don't even think all of them are necessarily doing it on purpose. Like
That's
because
true.
a girl is in front of me, a woman is in front of me, I'm going to ask more. It's just, I think the patriarchy is just so seeped in from it to just seeing women as more responsible for that kind of stuff. Like, I mean, even
That's
from
true
the
too.
teenage, like cover yourself up, the poor boys, around you. You're creating thoughts in their minds, and it has nothing to do with the puberty that they're going through, or anything like that. I think it's just automatic for a lot of them, and some of them definitely are creeps. And I have a friend that had a really horrific bishop that went above and beyond, that he was a creep. But I think it is unfortunately just really natural for men to be more thorough, I guess I'll say, in questioning women about sexual topics than they are about men. And I have a friend that was part of his deconstruction, it's when you put young guys in in bishoprics, it seems problematic to me. And so since that gives me hope for my youngest brother, because that's him. I'm hoping that'll help him in a couple of years from now. But anyway, this friend of mine went through a couple, disciplinary councils, and it was shockingly different for a woman being disciplined for a sexual thing than versus for a man. And he said that was really the beginning of the end for him, because for the women, it was so shameful. It was just, how could you, like, it was very detailed. What did you do? Exactly this, that, like blow by blow in a room full of men. Right. And then just heavy on the guilting and the shaming and look what you did to this guy and all this. But then for men, it was just like, well, look, you made a mistake. We all have urges. We get it. We're human,
Almost like a good old boys club.
Right. Yeah. It was just like, go and sin no more, basically. And he was shocked. And it happened multiple times before he was just like, I can't. Anyway, sorry, I derailed from you, but did you talk about it with your husband? Did you ask him, like, what, do you recall a conversation about this? Okay.
Yeah. I said,
what did you think?
I was like, at the time I didn't even process it. I was like, we passed. And then I got to go to the temple, and there was that mean lady, and I was like, okay, I got through it, and
because how was it like with your family? Because the non-member family can't come, so
they couldn't come to it, and I was really trying to downplay the fact that we're getting married, and my family, my grandparents, my mom, they were not people that wanted necessarily to do a big party. They would have rather not, actually they weren't social people. So I lucked out on that. But I also wanted to really downplay it. I didn't want to have a big reception. I just wanted to have a little luncheon for people that either came to the wedding or stood outside. And I would say half of them
wedding.
did. Yeah, I know.
I wouldn't want a gigantic wedding either, but it would be special, and I would want people special to me to be there,
Yeah, so
it's kind of sad. You're downplaying this important moment in your life for various reasons.
Right. And so I had one person that I knew on my side. It was a friend of mine, a male friend that had been on a mission, and he came up to the wedding. He was somebody I grew up with in LA. And he was the person, like, you have like a witness person on one side for the, it would typically the bride's father and the groom's father. Well, it was Mark's father, and my friend Sal, was this guy my own age, he was the guy in the temple, because all the other ones were either women who couldn't go, hadn't gone through the temple yet, or my mom, or so. But anyway, I really wanted to downplay it. And we told Mark's parents this, and they said, oh, sure, you kids do what you want. We'll just have a small little thing after the ceremony. But they surprised me with this big party ahead of the wedding, like the day before, and invited all their friends. And I was there by myself, and it was, it was just, it was very Mormon. I mean, they just had to do the Mormon thing.
Yeah.
And
kind of awkward.
Yeah, it was really awkward. But we got through it.
They were kind of sweet too, I think, because they wanted to celebrate with you.
They wanted to do it their way,
but
it was really it was just awkward, but we got through it.
Took it like a champ.
Yeah, well, I was more like a it was pretty exhausting, the whole process. So,
and that was in the Provo Temple. You got married.
Yeah, no, we got married. I went through the Provo Temple. I don't know how women do it, where they go through and get their endowment and then are married the same day. I don't know how they do all that. That had, but we went. I got the endowment in Provo, and then we were married in the Oakland Temple. So,
okay,
yeah, because my husband's from San Jose, so we're married up here.
What's the next step in your journey from here? Where do things start coming apart?
Jean asked me this when we talked yesterday. I just didn't fit in with the culture, as I've said. I like the arts, and I just was finding different ways. And finally, we had 2 little kids. We were living in Texas, in a suburb of Dallas, and I finally decided, you know what, I can't even try to do this anymore, because I don't fit in with these people and I don't enjoy them. And I mean, there are some very nice Mormons that were nice friends, but we disagreed on too many issues. And so I decided, you know what, I'm just going to be nice, to people, and I'm going to go there for spiritual reasons, the reason why you're supposed to go to church. And at the time I was teaching Sunday school to teenagers, and we were studying church history. So I thought, this is great, because I can just throw myself into studying church history, and I will regain my testimony, and I will be happy in church. And so at the time, it was around the time the first volume of the Joseph Smith papers came out, I think. And then I was reading that. I had the Institute manual. They were really smart kids. So the Sunday school manual wasn't going to cut it for him. So I dove into it. And I remember having this lesson where at the beginning of the class or term, whatever. And I said, it was about the first vision. I said, okay, we're going to be talking about the first vision next Sunday. Now, remember, if you need to have a testimony of the first vision, because if you don't, then you will not be able to have a testimony. I was literally saying this to this class. And so then I went home, I was studying about the first vision, and I discovered that there were all these versions of it, that he had related this experience to a number of people, and they were all different. And I was reading church books, I wasn't reading, anti-Mormon literature. And one of them, he didn't even...
Wait, I gotta pause. So you were finding out about these other
versions of the
church materials?
Yeah, like, the Joseph Smith papers had come out.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't remember what else I had been reading, but I definitely, yeah. I mean, it's out there. It's not hidden. And one of them, there were first it was 2 people that he saw, then it was 1. And one of them, he didn't mention God. And I'm like, okay, I know many years had passed and memories of compost, but how can you forget God? That just doesn't make any sense. And so literally the next Sunday, I go back to class and I don't have a testimony anymore. I've just completely lost my testimony, but I still felt like I had to keep going, to church for my family. And then,
I gotta say, that's fast.
Yeah.
That's really fast. And
well, I was miserable in church anyway. So it was, with the, just all the stuff, because I'm too liberal, I'm too, all this, too much of a feminist. And then, so I'm thinking, well, I have to stay with this for my family. And a few months after that, my daughter, we were after sacrament. splitting up to go our separate ways, the kids were going to go to primary. And my daughter came up to me and said, Mom, I don't want to go to class because I don't want to say his name, Brother Smith is teaching. And I liked Brother Smith. I thought he was a good guy. And I'm like, but then you never know about people, right? So I'm like, okay, why? What's the matter? And she said, well, last time I asked him why girls don't get to pass sacrament. And he said, because you get to have babies. And that's when the shelf just dropped. And I said, okay, we're going home. And we didn't go home, actually. We went to Target and I bought regular underwear and a coffee pot and whatever Emily wanted.
Nice.
Yeah, and to Maven's point about how fast it was, but yet it wasn't fast at the same time.
Yeah.
People say, oh, you're just looking to sin, but you were looking for reasons to stay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's totally different.
I bet you did too, right?
I find that most members of the church who, if they had any kind of dedication to it, with or without a testimony, if they had any kind of feeling for liking any aspect of it or wanting to stay, really try so hard to stay. And
That's right. I was looking for reasons to sin since I was 13, but didn't quite pull the trigger till I was 55.
Right? I know. And if I get the impression somebody wants to stay in the church, a former, because people come to you and they talk about their doubts. I mean, I'm sure you've had that happen with believing, but if I don't ever try and encourage them to leave, because it's so hard to leave. Yeah. I mean, so, I don't know.
It's a dichotomy between where we stand. We want really everybody to have full disclosure and informed consent.
Right.
Because that's what we expect when doing real estate or when doing medical services. Why not where the eternities are involved? But yet, since it's been so long for not having full disclosure or informed consent for anything that they've really done, it becomes shocking to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Let's talk about do you want to explain if anyone maybe is listening and is like, well, what's the big deal about being told, well, you get to have babies and men can't do that. So we do this and you can't do it. Why was that big enough to be like, this is the end for me. I can't take it anymore.
Well, I just did not want my daughter to believe that that's all she was good for. And that she had to, I remembered being at BYU and so many girls they're just there to get married. And I didn't want that for her. She's out of my two children, she was the more ambitious one, and actually she is Emily, her name's Emily, and she is now Dr. Emily Banta, and she's a college professor.
Awesome.
Wow.
And she didn't have babies. She didn't have kids, except for the kids she teaches and mentors, and So
and if she did, it should be her choice. I think that's another ironic thing about this idea in the church that women have babies and therefore that's why men have all the power and authority. But it's just, they control that as much as possible too.
Yeah. And thank you for going to Washington and protesting.
Yeah. So the irony behind the women get to have children is that in the church, so much of that is also dictated by men. I mean, first of all, just the idea that all women are supposed to. So that's already kind of a choice that's taken away. If you are a righteous woman, that's the choice you get. Am I going to be good or am I going to be bad? If you're going to be good, then the babies are part of it, that you should at least be trying. And then with the church's teachings also, they were very against birth control for a very long time. So it's, if you're ready to get married, at 18 or whatever, or earlier, if you're going further back in church history, you're ready to have kids, and you shouldn't get married with the idea that you're going to be on birth control or should wait or anything like that. There was a really strong feeling or idea that this should be left to, God. So you are going to have no birth control, just unprotected sex with your husband, and and as many children as the Lord will, quote unquote, bless you with. And then even then, when the church did actually start to be more okay with abortion in extreme circumstances, like for the health of the mother. Once that made it into the handbook and stuff, the wording around that, for a woman to have, quote unquote, permission to get an abortion was that it had to be something talked over with the bishop. So your local bishop had to be included in that very personal decision on, what, of course you had to have one, or it might have even said two, but I think it maybe it just listed one, competent medical authority determining that, yeah, your life is in danger, or that the fetus is not going to survive or thrive. And then of course your husband. So, and then of course you had to pray and like get confirmation from the Holy Ghost. So God, your husband, your bishop, and a doctor all had to agree that an abortion was okay. And just they never actually even ask her or assume about, the woman. She's never actually mentioned as part of this equation here. So that's how it is. And then even just with the number of children or the spacing, it's just you get married and you have kids. And if you end up having them one right after the other, like these are your prime childbearing years. And then all the way to like once the child is born and they're blessed in a circle of men. An entire circle of men are bouncing the baby. They pronounce a blessing. And this isn't part of it, but a lot of men do it. And it's seen as kind of cute or funny, but they do like the little Simba raise, after, and there'll be little chuckles in the audience, but it's just so much like, look what I did kind of a thing. And the women are not allowed to be part of that baby blessing. And the baby blessing is where you pronounce a lot of hopes and blessings and things you want to have for that child, which of course a mother has for her child as well as the father. But it just seems almost every aspect of it, every aspect of the choice of when and when you're ready and where and how many, all of that is taken away from women and given to, quote unquote, God, or the men in the church. So I just wanted to spell that out.
Something
I'll say for me real quick, when I first started thinking like Maven just talked about, I thought, well, the opposite of motherhood is fatherhood. It's not priesthood.
Yes.
Right.
That was about 12 years ago when I started to think about, the ordained women movement and other things. I thought that, God always wanted Black people to have the priesthood because he loved his children and he loves his female children as well. And he wants them to have the priesthood. And so someday they will. So that's when I started thinking like, well, the opposite of motherhood is fatherhood, not the priesthood.
Yeah. That's true.
And men don't need women to be able to get the priesthood, but women kind of need a man to be able to have a child. So there's still got to be a man involved, whereas men just don't need anything from us for their privileges. Yeah. So that was it for. So you go home. What about your husband? And it sounds like you have a boy and a girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they continued to go. We moved from the suburb of Dallas into Dallas proper, and they attended a little bit in that ward. I didn't, and Emily didn't, but the Marks did. They're both Mark, but it just took a little longer. But it was about a year, and then they decided, no, we don't want to do this. I mean, my son, he had decided he didn't want to go on a mission. It's interesting. He is very much a family man. He's got a great wife. They've got 3 kids. He loves being a father. He is not a patriarch. He's a father. But he did it the way he wanted to do it. He went to college. He graduated. They got jobs. They lived together for a while. And then they, finally they bought a house. They got married. It wasn't, or they got married they got married and then they bought a house and then they had their first, they had started having children. So it wasn't this, it's very unfair to young men too, I think, to expect going on a mission right away, come home, get married right away. Okay, now you got to get pregnant, get your wife pregnant and somehow, without even cracking a college textbook, basically.
Right, the Lord will bless you, even if you're poor. Right. And so I actually had one other last little question about your family. Does Emily get her name from a family name or from a famous woman author?
No, we just like the name.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not to be a leading question or yeah.
That's right. But it just made me wonder if that was something on your mind about, like literature and stuff like that. It could have been implanted, Emily Dickinson, right, comes to mind.
We actually did sort of think of the Emily in our town, the character Emily in our town. Yeah.
Okay.
So
it sounds like it didn't your disaffection from the church didn't have a catastrophic effect on your family. It seems like everyone was able to take it and roll.
Well, so my family isn't Mormon, so I mean,
even like your marriage and your children. This didn't
it was that was the big struggle in our marriage, was leaving the church. Other than that, I will always say I'm glad I joined the church. If I had to do over again, I'd still join the church. I'd still go to BYU because that's how I met Mark. But that was the big struggle for us, was the church, and it's frustrating to me, and also with his family. That was
because now you're the apostate in the family.
Yeah, and they blamed me for it, his parents, and that's okay. I mean, I didn't care. Sometimes it was frustrating, but yeah, it's like, okay, I'd rather because otherwise they would just take it out on him. But that was hard, to have that be burning a bridge with his family, and for a church that is supposedly so pro-family, and yet it undermines so many good families and relationships, and that was really too bad. So
that's right. So now that you weren't going to church anymore, did you have time for your creative juices to flow?
Yes. So the first thing I did, because I think you need an outlet, and is I started making jewelry. And I'm not very good at it, but you know why? I realized that what I wanted, there was a craft guild in Dallas, and I looked up these classes, and I was like, oh, I want to do the jewelry. And I think it's because I got to have a torch, and I got to bang things. I really think I wasn't very good at it, but I learned how to do it. And then
it's right, because jewelry making sounds so dainty and so feminine.
No, it's
it's just like, no, I'm working out my frustration here. I love that.
Yeah.
Creatively.
Yeah, exactly. And then we were still, when we moved to San Francisco from Dallas in 2003, and that's when we got out here. We were living in San Francisco at the time. Now I'm in Sonoma, but we were living in San Francisco, and that's when I started writing. And I wrote my first novel. I'll hold it up here, The Girls from Fourth Ward, and it's I'm very proud of it. And it basically was about it was basically about what it's like to be a girl in Mormonism, because that was what drove me out of it, was the experience. I didn't want my daughter to have that experience. And so, at the time, I think it was Sex and the City was just sort of wrapping up its the television show. Yeah, The Run. And I remember Mark and I were out for dinner just talking. I said, if you could write Sex and the City for Mormons, what would you, how would you do that for Mormon girls? Well, you'd have to go back to when they're 13. So yeah, because that's when you get to be single, is when, so that's what it is. It starts, with these girls that are, in their early teens, and goes through the young women's program with them. And they start out with a really nice bishop who's a good guy. And then they get a really, really bad bishop. And there's a murder, of course, because I like to write murder mysteries. So
your husband, it started with your husband just casually just throwing something out there in the universe.
Well, we were talking. I don't remember if he brought it up or I did, but yeah, it was just sort of like, what would you do? And I'd always wanted to write about Mormon girls and their experience,
And were you thinking this was just going to be a fun exercise like jewelry, like you were just going to spend some time doing it, or were you thinking, I'm going to take this seriously and I'm going to make it happen, like I'm a serious author?
The second, because that's always been my actual talent is writing. But I was very blocked I tried to write while I was a Mormon. I was very blocked. And then when I got out of it, I just, I had to get some distance from it. I had to have a few years there, and so, but once I started, I was like, okay, this is something I can do, I can do that. It isn't
how
like,
long,
it isn't like handwritten. Yeah.
How long did it take? And how did you,
oh gosh, I don't know.
Did you go and look back? Did you, at your relationships, did you look at any journals, or did you talk to any of your friends? How did you do like research for it or plan it?
I was, I reached out, on the internet to other Mormons. We had a big ex-Mormon group in the San Francisco Bay Area, actually, and we used to have parties at our house in San Francisco. They were really fun. And that was helpful. And some of them were writers, other former Mormon writers, that were helpful, and just writing critique groups. It was really, I have a character in it, a recurring character who's a detective who's not a Mormon, a police detective. And, he's just sort of this poor, incredulous person who doesn't understand all the Mormon stuff when he's investigating, this murder. So it was helpful too to have people outside the church read and help me with the process,
That's a good point. There's so much internal stuff that if you're not thinking about how an outsider might view it, doesn't make sense. So that's good. So it kind of seems a little bit like Under the Banner of Heaven, where you've got this investigator. Well, no, because the investigator is Mormon in that, isn't he? So never mind.
I don't remember. Under Bat.
Yeah, but it's a good, like an outsider investigator kind of trying to understand a very kind of close-knit community and get to the bottom of something. Why
would this be a motive for murder? Right. So, and I, at one point I was in a critique group that were, where they were mainly fantasy writers. And I was surprised by how helpful it was. It wasn't the right group for me ultimately, but because they could help me. This is like, oh, okay, what you're doing is world building. You got to drop your reader into this alternative world, and that is Mormonism, because the Mormons are it's strange that way. They are.
Yeah, it's just as unknown to them as a made up fantasy world that any other author would create. So I never thought of it like that. But you do literally have to do the same kind of thing to set it up, even if you didn't make up the world. It's a real one, but just people don't get it. Wow.
People don't get it. And Mormons are very, they're very secretive, they present a very different picture to the outside world than they, and when you're within it. And so you have to be able to show that. Because I did have people read it who said, oh, I have Mormon friends. They're not like that. Yes, they are. You just don't know. They don't talk to you about a lot of things, that.
So this is what is projected to the world. Like, This came out in 1965.
I remember. Oh gosh, yes.
Shiny, happy people, right?
Right. Was that around the time of the World's Fair, maybe?
Yeah, the World's Fair in New York.
And there was that, oh my goodness, that movie. Was the Happiness movie? What was that movie? Oh, Man's Search for Happiness.
Search for Happiness.
It is strange. It's really strange. There's that broken doll. Well, anyway, this is going.
I'll have to get D-Vase in on that.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, wonder if D-Vase has done like a watch and react. So D-Vase, he runs the channel Mormon News Roundup. And
he also does Mormon movie reviews.
Right, and Mormon movie reviews. It's the Mormon movie
there
reviews.
Must be. There has to be. It's the weirdest thing. Yeah. I just want to say, just because I have a son too, that I did write a follow-up. My next mystery is False Prophet, and it was dedicated to my son, and it talks about missionaries and so I did write, I don't think it's not easy for boys or girls, so Yeah. And then the third one in that series is Seer Stone. And it's the most recent. It came out, probably almost 2 years ago. And it was dedicated to my husband because of his heritage, because that's important to him, his history, his family history. So it goes back.
So it's a series. So how do you tie them together as a series? Or is it just in your mind a series?
It is the same characters. There are recurring characters in it. The police detective ends up being coming in. His name is Matt Ryan, he is becomes a private investigator. One of my favorite characters in it is a woman, a young woman, a young wife who, in the first one, in the Girls from Fourth Ward, her name's Carrie Zimmerman. She's pregnant through through the two, just about every scene in the Girls from Fourth Ward, and then and it goes through a period of years, but she's always pregnant, and then in False Prophet, she's pregnant. It takes place over a smaller period of time, but she's pregnant again, and then she ends up leaving the church. And then in the third novel, she's the private detective's assistant, and she's real sharp, and so, but she's still got all these kids in tow,
Right.
like
So
a good
part of her
Mormon
story.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it is a series. It's same character.
And so did you think of doing it as a series at first, or after you wrote the first book, did you think, oh, I could do another book?
Yeah. It's sort of it just kind of, took on a life of its own, the story.
Did I miss if you said where your books are available at?
I've got an Amazon page, and I've got a Facebook page too, author page that I just set up, and they're
okay.
Yeah, so we'll provide a link.
Yeah. And they're through I have a very, very small little enterprise called Mormon Alumni Association. There's a Mormon Alumni Association books that was actually started by Carol Hamer, but she and I run it together. Carol Hamer was Chanson, C.L. Hansen, and she's also behind Main Street Plaza, the blog that it used to be quite active. It's not as active as it used to be, but yeah. So
actually, so at Sunstone, there was a display of Mormon History Association, and I had talked to Jason Eccles earlier about it, and I didn't know what Mormon Alumni Association was, and so I invited like 1,000 of my Facebook friends to it, and usually about 10% respond. So like I doubled the number of people in it, thinking that it was what a cool name for graduates of Mormonism, right?
I know, that's Carol, that she came up with that. Yeah.
And then Jason said, oh, well, it's kind of like an authors group. And I go, oh. So I thought about, well, maybe the authors group should be called the authors group. And then the Mormon Alumni Association could be sort of what I was envisioning. And then I think Carol said, maybe.
Yeah, she's been doing it for a long time and collecting other novels. There are other novels that are in the little collective.
Yeah, the group hadn't really been active since 2022. And so I was thinking,
I know, the Facebook
perfect thing for more activity. So I wanted to spur activity.
Yeah, and
I'm a rabble rouser like that.
Yeah, and you did, because now everyone in the group's like, oh yeah, we gotta get on this. And
well, there you go. I did something.
You made a difference, Jean.
Yeah, you sure did.
Go ahead and ask some questions, and we'll probably should wrap it up soon. But
right. So we like to ask for advice or words of wisdom about the process. Well, really about anything, but for anyone who's looking maybe to also write a book, this is like your final words or of advice to offer anyone.
Oh, I don't know if I have advice, but I think that anything, do what you love to do. It's
right. And we talked about the support group that you used in order to bounce ideas off and things like that. Did you look for other resources outside of that group on like how to write or tell the storytelling?
I did. I did the course in the Mendocino Writers Conference is a wonderful, wonderful conference.
So there could be local writing groups that people could.
Mm-hmm. That was the one because it's close to me, and in an absolutely gorgeous setting. And I had critique groups. I think writing a lot of creative work is it's a solitary pursuit, whether you're an artist, whether you're a writer. And I think having those connections, those people to reach out to, the social even though most writers are tend to be loners, I think that's really important. And not to take criticism too seriously, to be able to accept it,
Did you look for a publisher? Did you think about self-publishing from the beginning? Did you have an editor?
I did the whole thing going through for agents and I do actually have a small publisher on my most recent novel, the Texas novel.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's about Texas, so I won't. Yeah, there are no Mormons in there.
That's right.
But interesting people though. Still, crazy people. Yeah.
I mean, really, true crime is like all the rage right now, right?
And I guess so. Podcasts,
and not necessarily true crime, but just crime stories. I mean, TV shows and stuff. Yeah,
right. Mysteries have always been a thing, right?
Yeah. Well, I've always enjoyed mysteries, so that's what I kind of fell into that. I did write the one romance novel just for fun, but it's not my preferred genre. So
just like to explore. Your creativity and stuff like that.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So actually, Maven, in closing, reminded me that I need to change the beginning of Latter Daily Digest to say we honor creators and the creative process to help inspire people, right? Because in a way, we do want to inspire people to step outside of your world and explore and do things and add value, to humanity. In any way you can. Thanks, Donna, for coming on our show. It's been awesome to talk with you. For the people viewing, if you like what you see, check our donation box, we'll say, in our description. And everybody have a great rest of the summer.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, Donna.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.